Chapter 1: The Truth in the Cafe. The crisp sound of porcelain shattering in the cafe made several nearby tables turn their heads. On my white shirt, dark brown coffee stains spread quickly, steaming faintly. Willow set down the empty cup, her red lips curving into a smile with not the slightest hint of apology. "Ah, sorry about that," she said. My hand slipped. The scorching heat of the liquid seeped through the fabric onto my skin. Easily around 75 degrees. The corner of my eye twitched slightly, but I calmly picked up a napkin and began to dab at my shirt. My voice was steady, as though professionally trained. "It's fine. I must have blocked your way. The temperature is just right. Not too hot." Willow narrowed her eyes. 3 years had passed, and no matter how she tried to make things difficult, the men before her always wore that flawless mask. Today was her university graduation day. Time to end this tedious game. "Do you know why I asked you out today?" she said, her slender fingers tapping against the table, freshly done crystal nails glittering under the sunlight. I took a paper bag with a luxury logo from my side and pushed it toward her. "A new Hermes limited edition. You mentioned last month you wanted it." Willow let out a cold laugh, not even glancing at the handbag countless girls dreamed of owning. "You think you're worthy of chasing me? A poor student living off scholarships, following me around for 3 years like a servant. You really think a few bags could win me over?" More eyes turned our way, whispers beginning to spread. My name carried some weight in the business school, known as the simp who rushed to Lou Group's heiress at her beck and call. Suddenly, I laughed. Not the gentle, compliant smile she was used to, but a liberating, almost chilling one that made Willow's back grow cold. "In fact, Miss Lou," I said, pulling out a document from my briefcase and laying it neatly on the coffee-stained table, "our relationship has always been nothing more than a business contract." Willow frowned and looked down. The bold black words at the top stabbed her eyes. Emotional service agreement. Party A, Lou Group. Party B, George. Signed 3 years ago, on the very day she entered university. "What kind of sick joke is this? Didn't your father tell you?" My voice remained courteous, but with a detachment she had never heard before. 3 years ago, Mr. Lou hired me at an annual salary of $300,000 to be your emotional companion. My primary duty was to satisfy your need for male attention, and also, I paused, to correct your excessive arrogance. Willow's face turned pale instantly. She snatched the contract and flipped to the last page. Her father's flamboyant signature and the company's red seal glared back at her. The contract term was 3 years, ending today at 5 o'clock. I checked my watch. 4 hours and 13 minutes remain. "But since you clearly expressed your intent to terminate, we can end it early." From my bag, I took out a leather-bound notebook. "This contains records of your preferences, habits, and emotional patterns over the past 3 years. Coffee, 2 sugars, but the sugar-free label must face outward. On rainy days, you get migraines, painkillers prepared in advance. Around the 20th each month, mood swings due to your cycle, all classified by date." A wave of dizziness hit Willow. The gestures she had believed came from love were merely professional tasks. You all." Her voice trembled, unsure if from anger or something more complicated. I stood up, placing the notebook carefully by her side, my movements precise as though completing a final handover. "According to the supplementary clause, I am obliged to inform you there will be a 3-month emotional withdrawal period. I suggest you adapt gradually to life without personal care." I bowed slightly, respectful yet unapproachable. "It has been an honor to serve you for 1,095 days, Miss Lou. From tonight, you will no longer receive my goodnight messages." With that, I turned and left without hesitation. Willow remained frozen in her seat, suddenly realizing this was the first time in 3 years that I had walked away before she did. Chapter 2: The Shattered Tiara. When Willow stood before her father's study door, the contract in her hand was already crumpled from her grip. She didn't even bother to knock, just pushed it open. Pablo looked up from his pile of documents. Behind his gold-rimmed glasses, his gaze flickered for a moment when he saw the paper in his daughter's hand, then quickly returned to calm. "Explain." Willow slapped the contract onto the mahogany desk, her voice squeezed out between clenched teeth. Mr. Lou slowly removed his glasses and wiped the lenses with a velvet cloth. The gesture was all too familiar. He always did this before announcing an important decision. Pablo sighed. "I thought George would only tell you once the contract ended. Seems he decided to reveal it early." Willow's voice shot up, sharp and trembling. "So it's true, you paid someone to be my simp, emotional companion." Mr. Lou corrected. "It's a legitimate profession, quite common in Japan. I hired a headhunting agency, reviewed 12 candidates. George was the most outstanding in every aspect." The room spun around Willow. She braced herself against the desk, her nails digging into the solid wood. "Why? Do you remember your high school graduation ball?" His voice suddenly hardened. "You made that boy who escorted you home cry on the spot, just because the roses he bought weren't the color you wanted." Willow opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Of course she remembered. The sight of that nerd fleeing with a red face had amused her for an entire week. After that, I did some digging. Mr. Lu pulled a file from the drawer. Your first 6 boyfriends, all developed varying levels of anxiety after breaking up with you. The worst case was young Chan. He spent half a year in therapy. That was there. Too weak, not worthy of you. Mr. Lu cut her off. Willow, the problem isn't them. It's you. You treat suitors like disposable cutlery. Heat rushed to Willow's face. She wanted to argue, but an image flashed in her mind. Just last week she had tossed George's milk tea into the trash, the one he had queued 2 hours for, in front of the entire class. George is a psychology graduate student, specializing in emotional dependency. Mr. Lu continued in a calmer tone. I asked him to help you build a healthier view of intimate relationships, and also, he hesitated for the right words, to let you experience what unconditional care feels like, so that you might learn to cherish it. So I'm just an experiment to you. Willow's voice quivered. No. Mr. Lu met her eyes steadily. I just want you to understand, no one in this world is obligated to treat you well. Not George. Not me. Not even your mother, if she were still alive. The words pierced Willow's chest like a knife. Her mother had died when she was only 8. And since then, her father had filled every corner of her life with material comforts. He recorded everything about me. Willow murmured, remembering that terrifyingly meticulous notebook. That was part of the job, Mr. Lu said lightly, slipping his glasses back on. Now that the contract has ended, what do you think? What do I think? Willow's mind raced with images from the past 3 years, midnight snacks at 3 a.m., the umbrella that always appeared on rainy days, the small wishes she had voiced casually that came true the following week, all of it, priced and itemized. I feel sick. She turned toward the door. Her father's voice followed her. By the way, George is quite popular at school. He only rejected every social invitation because of you. Willow slammed the door shut behind her. When I pushed open the iron door of the rented apartment, my roommate Luis was sprawled on the couch playing video games. Without even turning his head, Luis snickered. Yo. Release after serving the full sentence. Didn't the princess keep you for a farewell dinner? I chuckled and tossed my keys onto the coffee table. This 2-bedroom, barely 60 square meters, was my only refuge besides school. Every time I returned here from Willow's luxury apartment, it felt like crossing between 2 worlds. 4 hours earlier than expected, I said, pulling a thick black notebook from the shelf, 3 times the size of the one I'd given Willow. Luis finally paused his game and leaned over with curiosity. What's that? Your simp diary. More accurately, the complete personality analysis of Willow, I replied, opening the notebook. Pages were crammed with observation notes, some marked with sticky tabs and photos. My master's thesis material. Luis whistled. Impressive. Making money while doing research. So, just like you diagnosed from the start, she's really a case of functional narcissistic personality. I didn't answer immediately. Walking onto the balcony, I flicked my lighter. Its blue flame sharp against the night. She's more complicated than I thought. I touched the flame to a corner of the notebook. She does know how to care for people. It's just, the fire consumed the pages quickly. Luis leaned against the doorway, for once not making jokes. Just what? She's too afraid of being rejected, so she rejects the whole world first, I said, releasing the burning book into a metal bin. A textbook defense mechanism. Luis raised an eyebrow. Sounds like somebody's a little reluctant to let go. I watched the last page crumble into ash, the one with a candid photo of Willow asleep in the library. That day, the sunlight had been perfect, and without makeup. Her face looked unexpectedly soft. Pure professional integrity, I said, stepping back inside. Starting tomorrow, I can finally take on that youth counseling project. Time to celebrate. Luis pulled 2 beers from the fridge. My treat. The icy touch of the can reminded me of today's scalding coffee. The look of smug triumph in Willow's eyes, and the shock when I laid out the contract, made for a perfect contrast. Smiling, I popped the tab. To freedom. Maria showed up just as Willow sat in the middle of her walk-in closet, surrounded by dozens of designer bags, all gifts from George over the past 3 years. I heard you poured coffee on George. Maria plopped herself onto an Hermes bag without ceremony. Nice work. Finally forced him to come clean. Willow's head snapped up. You knew all along. Please. The whole campus knew. Maria rolled her eyes. You were the only one who thought your charm was endless. Honestly, after 3 years, George deserves an Employee of the Year award. Willow grabbed the nearest Chanel bag and hurled it at her. Maria caught it effortlessly. That's this season's new release. What a waste if you break it. Get out. Nope. Maria leaned closer. Do you even know how many girls George turned down? Just in the psychology department. 3 campus beauties. The guy stayed pure for professional ethics, while you went on acting like some queen. Willow suddenly remembered last Valentine's Day, when she had found a flirtatious text on George's phone. She'd thrown the phone into the fountain on the spot. Thinking back now, that message was probably revenge from one of the rejected girls. He was that popular. Duh. Maria flung her arms dramatically. Top 3 in the year academically. Substitute forward on the basketball team. And that ascetic pretty boy face. If he hadn't been trailing behind you like a servant all day, the line of girls chasing him would have stretched to the school gate. An inexplicable irritation prickled inside Willow. She had always thought George was the kind of nerd nobody wanted, someone surviving only thanks to her mercy. So what? He's single now. Why don't you go after him? I'm not picking up what you tossed away. Maria stood, shooting her a meaningful look. But mark my words, within a month, you'll regret it. In your dreams. Willow snapped. After Maria left, Willow mechanically hung each handbag back in its place. Tied to every handle was a small handwritten card from George, noting the purchase date and occasion. She had never bothered to read them before. On the oldest LV wallet, the card read, "Congratulations, Willow, on winning the debate competition. Although I personally thought the opposing argument was more convincing. Your performance was indeed outstanding." November 2, 2024. Willow frowned. She had no memory of George ever disagreeing with her debate. In her recollection, he always nodded with a smile, saying, "You're right." A strange chill crept up her spine. For the first time, she realized she might have never truly known the real George. At 3:17 a.m., Willow jolted awake from a nightmare. In the dream, she was running down a hallway with no end. At every corner, she caught sight of George's back. But whenever she called his name, the figure turned, and it was always a stranger wearing George's mask. She fumbled for her phone. The harsh glow of the screen made her squint. The notification bar was empty, no unread messages. And certainly not the unfailing, "Good night. See you tomorrow." Willow opened their chat window. The last conversation stopped yesterday morning. She had ordered him to meet her at the cafe at 2 p.m., and his reply was a simple, "Okay." Compelled by something she couldn't name, she began scrolling upward. Thousands of messages poured like a waterfall, almost all of them her commands and complaints, with George's replies always brief, always courteous. On April 12th, she had sent 17 voice messages ranting about a group project. The last one went out at 1:14 a.m. George had replied within 2 minutes. "I've contacted your group members. The issue is resolved. Get some rest." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember how she used to handle problems before George was there. Outside, the early summer night breeze stirred the sheer curtains. She stared at the ceiling and, for the first time, noticed a sticky note on the air conditioner vent. Cleaning date, May 15th. George. Even that, he had taken care of. Willow got out of bed, barefoot, and walked to the closet. In the bottom drawer, she found the notebook George had left earlier that day. On the first page, neatly formatted tables listed her basic information. Under taboos, he had written, "Hates being compared, especially with her mother. Hates mint flavor. Hates disrupted plans." She flipped to a random middle page. The date was her birthday last year. Unlike the other objective records, this entry was written in slightly messy handwriting. Today's budget exceeded. Birthday gift plus surprise party, but worth it. Willow smiled when blowing out the candles, a genuine smile. Note, when she made her wish, her eyelashes trembled. Beautiful. Willow's heart skipped a beat. She snapped the notebook shut as if it were something dangerous. Back in bed, she stared at her phone screen for 10 whole minutes before typing. How often should the AC filter be replaced? Before sending, she hesitated. Her thumb hovered over the button as she realized this was the first time in 3 years she had to think about what to say to George. In the end, she deleted the message and tossed the phone aside. Outside, the eastern sky was already turning pale. Willow buried her head under the pillow, but sleep would not come again. Chapter 3, The Game of Chance Encounters. Beneath the ginkgo tree in front of the psychology building, Willow adjusted her sunglasses for the third time. June sunlight, like melted gold, streamed through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on her pale dress. She glanced at her watch, 10:15. According to the class schedule she had hacked from the school system, George's class would end in 5 minutes. I must be insane, she muttered under her breath, fingers nervously rubbing the folder in her hands. On this Wednesday morning, she had skipped her equestrian lesson and spent 2 hours getting ready, all for the sake of an accidental encounter with a man who used to obey her every word. Students began streaming out of the lecture hall. Willow quickly dabbed her cushion foundation on her flawless face, pretending to fix non-existent makeup smudges. Then, feigning the look of someone in a hurry, she walked toward the doors. At the perfectly calculated moment, she just happened to cross paths with me. At barely a meter away, Willow deliberately stumbled, sending her folder crashing to the ground, papers scattering everywhere. I stepped forward immediately, dropped to one knee, and within seconds had gathered most of the papers. "Your documents," I said, standing up and handing her the neatly stacked folder. On my face was a polite smile she had never seen before. Watch the steps. No extra greetings. No words of concern. Not even an extra glance. I said what I had to say and moved to walk past her. as if she were just another student who had clumsily dropped something. Willow grabbed my wrist. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" My eyes dropped to her hand, realizing how abrupt her action was. Willow quickly let go, as if scalded. "On Wednesdays at this hour, you usually have French," I said evenly. "Skipping class isn't a good habit." Willow's eyes widened. He still remembered her class schedule. Did that mean professional reflex? I cut into her thoughts, tapping my temple. "Part of memory training. Have a good day." With a slight nod, I strode toward the library without looking back. Willow stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by a sense of absurdity. Her carefully orchestrated, chance encounter must have seemed like childish play acting in George's eyes. "Bastard," she muttered through clenched teeth, unsure whether her anger was aimed at George or at herself for dressing up so carefully for this farce. The glass doors of the campus magazine office reflected her wavering figure. She had already paced the hallway 3 times, stopping at the entrance each time before turning away. "If you're going to look, just come in. Why sneak around?" The door suddenly swung open, and David, the editor-in-chief, nearly collided with her while carrying a heavy stack of magazines. Willow stepped back, tilting her chin to mask her embarrassment. "Who's sneaking?" "I came to get the latest issue." "Surprising. Since when does Miss Lou take an interest in our little publication?" David arched a brow, but still stepped aside. "Latest issue is on the left shelf. Help yourself." The office smelled of ink and coffee. Willow headed straight for the rack. On the cover of the newest issue, bold letters read, "The Emotional Service Industry, Professional Companionship and Ethical Boundaries." The cover photo was a side profile of George at a lecture podium. Her fingers trembled so much she nearly tore the page. Inside, a 2-page spread featured an exclusive interview with George, along with a full-page photo of him leaning against the psychology building hallway. White shirt, black slacks, gold-rimmed glasses, his gaze focused and profound. He looked nothing like the submissive figure she remembered. Many people mistake emotional companions as high-class simps, which is a complete misconception. George was quoted, speaking with confidence, "We're more like emotional trainers, using professional methods to help clients build healthier perceptions of relationships. For example, some clients are long accustomed to privilege and lack empathy." Willow snapped the magazine shut. Those words felt like a public execution. "When was this interview done?" She forced herself to ask David, trying to sound calm. "Last week," David replied without looking up from the stack of drafts he was organizing. "George is a star. Our editor-in-chief worked hard to land him the youngest master's candidate in the psychology department, and he even published a paper in psychological science last year." A heavy weight pressed against Willow's chest. George had published an academic paper. George, the one who used to help her with assignments without daring to voice his own opinions. "Oh, right." David suddenly remembered something. He pulled a ticket from his drawer and handed it over. "This Friday, George is giving a public lecture on power dynamics in intimate relationships. You should go. Guaranteed to change the way you see things." Willow took the ticket. The embossed gold letters read, "George, Hidden Control and Counter-Control in Contemporary Intimate Relationships." "Thanks," she muttered, shoving the ticket into her bag before walking away. "Hey, you haven't paid for the magazine," David called after her. Without turning back, Willow waved her hand. "Put it on my tab." The moment she stepped out of the editorial office, she pulled out her phone and typed George's name. Instantly, the screen filled with a dozen academic entries. The top result was a co-authored paper, Emotional Dependency and Personality Formation in Privileged Environments, a 3-year longitudinal study. Willow's breath quickened. 3 years, a longitudinal study. Her finger trembled as she tapped open the abstract. The keywords, narcissistic tendencies, privileged class, emotional manipulation, stabbed at her eyes like knives. "So that's it." She let out a bitter laugh. "I wasn't just a client, I was a subject." From afar, the bell tower tolled 11 times. Willow suddenly remembered something and quickened her pace toward the library. If she wasn't mistaken, George always studied on the 3rd floor of the library psychology section every Wednesday at 11:30. The library's air conditioning was icy cold. Hugging her arms, Willow moved among the towering shelves. Through a gap in row G, she spotted George at once. By the window, sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting striped shadows across his body. His profile was bent over a book, sharp in the shifting light, absorbed and focused. Willow drew a long breath, then casually walked toward the adjacent shelf. She pulled out a copy of Introduction to Social Psychology at random, but her ears were tuned to the sounds from George's corner. The rustle of pages, the scratch of a pen across paper, an occasional soft cough. For 3 years, these sounds had been the constant background of her life. Now, they felt as if they came from across an invisible wall. Willow peeked over and saw the thick volume spread open in front of George, Treatment and Intervention of Narcissistic Personality Disorder. Blood rushed to her head. With a loud bang, she slammed her own book shut, startling several nearby students. Hearing the noise, I looked up. Through the gap between the shelves, My gaze met hers. Calmly, I adjusted my glasses, gave a polite nod, then lowered my head again, as if she were no more than an irrelevant passerby. Fuming, Willow strode to my desk and slapped her hand down on the book. Interesting choice of reading, she hissed, her sharp tone barely restrained. Doing follow-up research, Professor Wong. I slowly closed the book with deliberate grace, then spoke. Ordinary academic reference. Is there a problem? Don't play dumb. Willow's nails dug into her palm. That so-called longitudinal study, I was your lab rat, wasn't I? 3 years. You pocketed my father's money while collecting data for your paper. Quite the scheme. Students nearby were already glancing over with curiosity. I stood up from above. The height difference forced Willow to look up at me, something that had never happened in the past 3 years. I had always kept myself just slightly lower than her. Let's talk outside. My voice was low but firm, leaving no room for refusal. Behind the library, the lawn was deserted. Beneath an oak tree, I stopped and turned to face Willow, expression grave. First of all, the paper used completely anonymized data, approved by the ethics committee. My voice was steady, like delivering an academic presentation. Second, yes, I did take this job with academic considerations in mind, but every service I provided was strictly within the contract. Service? Willow echoed with scorn. Does that include remembering my mother's death anniversary, sitting up all night when I had a fever, Anne? Her voice caught, and every time I lost my temper, you always apologized immediately, whether or not it was my fault. I finished her sentence, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Because that's Article 17 of the contract, Party B must unconditionally maintain the emotional stability of Party A's daughter. Willow swayed with dizziness. She had always thought George's submissiveness came from weakness, or at least partly from genuine affection. So it was all an act. Not entirely. My eyes drifted toward the distance. Professional standards required me to maintain boundaries. But I'm still human, not stone. I paused. That said, discussing this now serves no purpose. Willow wanted to lash out, something sharp, something cruel, something that would shatter that maddeningly calm mask on George's face. But her throat tightened. Not a single word came. There's a lecture on Friday, if you're interested. I pulled a ticket from my pocket, identical to the one already tucked in Willow's bag, and placed it on the stone bench beside us. It might help you understand some things. With that, I turned and walked away. Willow stared at the ticket. Suddenly, she realized this was the first time in 3 years George had ever invited her anywhere. Chapter 4, The Birthday Without Him. Willow stood in the center of the KTV room, champagne glass raised high. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the glass, scattering bright flecks onto her face. 23 carefully dressed young men and women surrounded her, all shouting in unison, "Happy birthday, make a wish, make a wish." Maria chimed in, her cheeks flushed from alcohol. Willow closed her eyes. In past years, George would be at the very edge of the crowd, quietly recording everything with a camera. The moment she blew out the candles, he would hand her a wet wipe, because he knew she hated having frosting on her fingers. "I wish Hermes releases more limited editions next year," she announced loudly, drawing cheers and laughter. When she opened her eyes, her gaze instinctively flicked toward the doorway, but of course, there were only waiters coming in and out with fruit platters. "Where's your shadow this year?" A silver-haired boy leaned in, offering her a brightly colored cocktail. Wasn't he always the one in charge of taking photos? Willow's smile froze. 3 months had passed, and George is no longer Willow's simp, had gone from rumor to campus consensus, but the silver-haired exchange student clearly hadn't caught up. "Oh, him?" Maria cut in quickly, giving Willow a playful wink. "Willow dumped him. He's probably crying somewhere right now." The room burst into laughter. Willow downed the cocktail in one gulp, the liquid burning her throat but doing nothing to quench the fire raging inside her chest. The party lasted until 1 in the morning. Willow couldn't remember how much she had drunk, only the endless toasts and hollow compliments. When the last guest finally left, she collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the spinning disco lights on the ceiling. Suddenly, she wanted to hear George's voice. In her contacts, George was still pinned at the top of recent calls. She pressed dial, holding the phone to her ear, listening to the long, hollow ring. "Hello. This is the psychological assistance hotline. Our office is currently closed." The mechanical voice stunned her. She lowered the phone to double-check the number. Correct, it was George's number. But the response had changed. For the past 3 years, no matter the time, George had always answered within 3 rings. She dialed again, stubbornly. "Hello, this is George," she shouted into the phone. "I know you're listening. Today's my birthday. And you, how dare you?" Beep, beep, the line disconnected. Willow stared at the screen, refusing to believe George had hung up on her. She dialed again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. "The user you are trying to reach is currently unavailable." With a violent motion, she hurled the phone at the wall. The latest iPhone split in two with a dull crack. Tears welled up without warning. blurring her vision. This was not the birthday she had planned for her 23rd year, no handwritten card delivered at midnight, no hangover pills ready in advance, not even the familiar figure who always escorted her home after the party ended. Bastard. She sobbed, not knowing whether she was cursing George or herself for realizing just how pathetic she had become. In the lab, I set my phone down and looked at Lisa, the junior student, staring at me in shock. Sorry, did that disturb the experiment? I asked softly. Lisa shook her head, wide eyes full of curiosity. Was that Willow? I didn't answer. Instead, I switched my phone to airplane mode and slipped it back into my pocket. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across my face. Let's continue. Where were we? I turned back to the computer screen, where Lisa's flowchart for an emotion recognition algorithm glowed. Senior, you're really not going back? Lisa asked cautiously. After all, today is her birthday. Our contract ended 3 months ago. My voice was steady, as though discussing the weather. Besides, I gestured toward the screen. If this algorithm is finished before next month's symposium, it'll strengthen your Stanford application. Lisa bit her lip, words left unsaid. Silence returned to the lab, broken only by the rhythmic tapping of keys. 2 hours later, I walked Lisa back to her dorm. The street lamps stretched our shadows long across the campus path. At the entrance to the women's dormitory, Lisa suddenly turned. Senior. I heard Willow's been asking about you. I raised an eyebrow. Such as, like, your talk at the neuroscience forum last week, Anne. Her face flushed red. And whether we're dating. I chuckled. Campus gossip has endless creativity. So, we're not, right? Lisa asked quietly, eyes fixed on her canvas shoes. You're a very good research partner, Lisa. My tone was gentle. Good night. On the way back to my dorm, my phone buzzed repeatedly, messages from Luis, with photos from Willow's birthday party attached. The last one read, Bro, are you sure you're not picking her up? She looks really drunk. I enlarged one of the photos. Willow, in a silver sequin dress, was dancing on a coffee table, skirt twirling, her face stretched into an exaggerated smile. A smile I knew too well, the kind that never reached her eyes. I deleted all the photos and replied, not my concern. At the dorm entrance, a familiar figure made me stop. Pablo leaned against a black Mercedes, his tailored suit strikingly out of place in the campus setting. Mr. Liu, I frowned slightly. At this hour? Pablo straightened. It's Willow's birthday. I know. She's drunk. At Blue Diamond KTV. He held out a car key. Go pick her up. I didn't take it. With all due respect, Mr. Liu, our contract has ended. Anne. I paused. Are you sure this would help Willow? The night breeze rustled. Under the dim glow of the lamp, Pablo's expression was unreadable. You're right, he said at last, retracting the key. I hadn't thought it through. I nodded, ready to leave, when Pablo spoke again. By the way, the contract Willow saw was the simplified version. I turned, eyes narrowing. Meaning, the full version is in the safe, Pablo said, opening his car door. It includes the clause, for 3 years following contract termination, Party A's daughter is prohibited from pursuing Party B in any form. Otherwise, a penalty of 1 million applies. I froze. Of course I remembered that clause, but I had dismissed it as nothing more than a father's overprotective measure. She knows. This afternoon, Pablo slid into the car. Through the lowered window, he added with a meaningful tone. Her exact words were, "A million. I can afford it." The Mercedes glided away into the night. I stood before the empty dormitory building, something stirring faintly in my chest, like a long dormant butterfly testing its wings, straining to break free. The business school's room 208 was packed. Every seat was filled, and even the aisles were lined with students standing. I scanned the room, and there, in the far corner of the last row, sat Willow. Her cap was pulled low, but I recognized her instantly. I didn't pause. I kept lecturing. Consumer psychology was this semester's open course, and today's topic was the scarcity principle. My tone was steady, unhurried, occasionally lightened with examples that drew laughter from the class. Still, I could feel her gaze. That look was too familiar, curious, probing, laced with a kind of restraint. I shouldn't have let it matter, but somewhere inside, there was a faint tremor. Now, let's try an experiment. I picked up a stack of papers and handed them to the teaching assistant. Please distribute these. Lisa hurried forward, dimples showing as she smiled. Many students noticed. Willow noticed too. I could feel it. When I finished explaining the task, students paired up. I stepped down from the podium, weaving through the rows, until I stopped directly at her desk. I'll partner with you, I said softly. She looked up, startled. I'm just here to audit. That's fine. I pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, deliberately casual. Willow caught the faint scent of cedar, my usual cologne. Sliding the questionnaire toward her, I reminded, the first part's easy. Write down your most recent impulsive purchase. She took the pen, but her hand trembled. When she finished, Her elbow knocked over her water bottle. The spill spread quickly across the desk, streaming toward my side. Careful. She reached instinctively to wipe it up, but I stopped her hand. Don't move. I grabbed a towel from beneath the podium and quickly soaked up the water. These desks are slanted. The spill always flows this way. She froze, eyes clouded with complexity. Then she stared at me. You knew I'd be here. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I said evenly. Second question. Analyze the psychology behind impulsive spending. Why do people pay for things they don't need? She bit her lip, meeting my eyes. Because what you can't have always stirs the strongest desire. My throat tightened, but I held my composure. The classroom lights reflected off my lenses, a calm gleam that hid whatever flicker stirred beneath. Professor Wong. Time's up. Lisa called from the podium. I gathered the questionnaire, my tone flat. Thanks for participating, as though she were just any student. The dismissal bell rang. Students surged out of the room. Some clustered around me with questions. Lisa stood beside me, smoothly taking my lecture notes. We exchanged a wordless look, simply professional synergy. Yet in someone's eyes, it became a piercing thorn. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Willow still frozen in her seat, her back stiff. From the doorway, a voice rang out. Forgot to mention, he was voted most popular lecturer this semester. Course slots filled in 3 minutes. It was Maria. Her words carried like a deliberate arrow, aimed at Willow. Chapter 5, Disguise and True Feelings. The afternoon cafe. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, shining on the documents laid out on the table. I was flipping through the speech script, preparing for tomorrow's recording. I had already rehearsed countless times in my mind which sensitive points the host might bring up. The bell over the door rang. I looked up. Lisa and a few classmates walked in. The citrus-toned fragrance spread through the air. I knew that was her signature scent. Her voice was crisp. I'm so nervous. It's my first time on TV. I walked over, smiling and nodding. I've reviewed the script. They may ask about privileged backgrounds, emotional manipulation, and the 3-year tracking case. They listened with excitement, but my gaze drifted inadvertently toward the corner by the window. That familiar figure, golden hair cascading down, her profile hidden in shadow. Willow. She lowered her head, fingers gripping the coffee cup tightly, as if trying hard to pretend she was just a passerby. But I knew, she was listening to every word. 3-year tracking. She must have realized. The next afternoon, I waited in the counseling room. Please fill out this questionnaire, and then we'll begin. My voice was as calm as always. The Miss Lee across from me wore a wig and thick-framed glasses, even deliberately lowering her voice. But I recognized her instantly. Willow. As she ticked boxes on the paper, her fingertips trembled slightly. I pretended not to notice and continued guiding. You mentioned that you're always unable to maintain long-term relationships. Could you be more specific? She recited her prepared lines in a low voice. Someone treated me very well, yet I always made things difficult for him. Now that he's gone, I picked up the thread, actually miss the feeling of being cared for. No. She jerked her head up, then quickly lowered it again. I closed the tablet, folding my hands on my knees, and spoke more softly than usual. Some people hurt those who treat them well, because being loved takes more courage than loving. Accepting means exposing vulnerability. Hurting is only a defense. In that instant, her expression tightened. No wig or glasses could conceal that shaken look. When the 50 minutes ended, her forehead was damp with sweat. I escorted her to the door, handed her my card, and said, "This is a special case. I'll reserve extra time." At the moment our fingertips touched, I almost lost control. That evening in the studio, I sat on the blue sofa, the cufflinks on my sleeve reflecting the lights. Those were the casual gift she once gave me. The host asked, "When a professional caretaker develops genuine feelings, how should it be handled?" I smiled faintly. A contract can restrict behavior, but it cannot regulate emotions. The audience burst into laughter. From the crowd I heard Lisa's crisp applause. The camera swept across the seats. My face remained calm, yet a subtle sense of loss welled up inside me. Would she watch this episode? The following night, Luis barged into my place. "Why are you keeping all this trash?" "Movie stubs, candy wrappers, a bunch of yellowed rubber bands." I was squatting on the floor, opening storage boxes one by one, arranging them in chronological order. "Don't touch that." My voice was low. Luis waved a crumpled note, reading loudly, "George, I'm thirsty. Going to buy milk tea, iced, 30% sugar." "What is this? A slave contract?" I snatched it back. "This is data. Oh please, just admit it, you like her." I fell silent, carefully placing the note back into the box labeled June 8, 2023. Finally, I muttered, "So what if I like her? We're not from the same world." Luis was about to retort when the door suddenly opened. "Excuse me." She stood at the doorway, holding a medical record forgotten in the counseling room. Her voice was deliberately steady, but I saw the light in her eyes. "Miss Lee." I quickly put on my professional mask, feigning surprise, but my fluster had already been caught. She glanced at the storage box I had hastily pushed under the table. a faint, knowing smile on her lips. Sorry for disturbing. She turned to leave. I stood frozen, heartbeat pounding like a drum. Later, I heard the forum explode, confirmed. Willow disguises herself to infiltrate the psychology department, new evidence of her pursuing George. The post was accompanied by a photo of her in disguise walking into the counseling building. I stared at the screen for a long time, then shut down the computer. She was no longer the aloof heiress watching coldly from the sidelines, but had stepped into the game herself. Only, how long can I endure this game? Chapter 6, Torrential Rain and Faint Light. The weather forecast had said it would rain tomorrow, but no one expected such a downpour. I was in the lab organizing data, and it was already close to 10 o'clock. Looking out the window, the rain seemed intent on washing the world clean. When I finally turned off the lights and left, I habitually exited through the side door. The moment I opened my umbrella, I saw her, Willow. She was standing under the eaves of the psychology building, the hem of her dress soaked, her fingers trembling. That instant, my steps froze. What are you doing here? I tried to keep my voice steady, though the sound of the rain nearly drowned it out. Passing by, she lifted her chin, stubborn as if unafraid of any questioning, but I saw the rainwater streaming down her neck, and the tremor in her eyelashes. A strange ache surged in my throat. I held out my umbrella. The rain won't stop anytime soon. Take it. She didn't take it. Raindrops slid from her lashes, like tears. Why did you write my name in the acknowledgements? She asked, her voice hoarse. My hand stiffened midair. The raindrops pounded on the umbrella, as fast and urgent as a heartbeat. Academic protocol. I answered with restraint. You did provide the research setting. Just that. What else would it be? I countered. Lightning split the night sky. I knew she saw that flicker of restrained pain in my eyes. I'm leaving. I pulled the umbrella back. Next month I'm heading to Boston. An offer from Harvard's Department of Psychology. She froze, as though struck by a heavy blow, yet still forced a smile. Congratulations. You've finally gotten rid of me. That smile was flawless, yet more painful than tears. I didn't look back, only walked into the curtain of rain. The closing sound of the umbrella was like a curtain call. When I returned to my office, the door burst open. Are you even human? Luis stormed in, rain dripping from his clothes. He threw down a stack of photos. Look. She waited in the rain for 2 hours. In the photos, she was in a soaked white dress clinging to her body, crouching on the steps like a bird with broken wings. My fingers pinched the edge until the photo crumpled. Yet I still said, she brought it on herself. Brought it on herself. Luis glared. Man, I don't get you. You clearly like her. You've collected every scrap of paper from her over the past 3 years. Now she's making the first move, and you play the saint. I pulled open a drawer, took out a document, and pushed it toward him. A non-disclosure agreement. He frowned. I signed it. I removed my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. Besides providing emotional companionship, I was also tasked with evaluating her psychological state. Pablo wanted to know if his daughter was fit to take over the family business. Luis whistled. So those observation notes, partly work-related. I looked toward the window. The rain was easing. I'm not sure whether my feelings for her are real, or just a byproduct of long-term role-playing. And what about her? Luis jabbed at the photo. She never signed any damn contract. I fell silent. Pulling up the surveillance footage. On screen, she was quietly placing a file into my drawer. Last week, I said. What is it? Ito Corporation's financial irregularity reports from the past 3 years. My voice carried a softness I couldn't suppress. I've been researching corporate criminal psychology lately. So, she was helping you. Using her father's intelligence network. I shut down the video. It only complicates things further. Luis collapsed onto the sofa, shaking his head. Damn, you two are impossible. One would rather stand in the rain than say a soft word. The other's dying inside but pretends to be cold. I didn't argue. I only picked up the photo of her back, gently wiping away the water stains. The Harvard offer, is it real? Luis asked suddenly. Yeah. When are you leaving? The 5th of next month. He stared at the ceiling, sighing. Tell me, if she knew you were leaving, would she? I closed my eyes, locked the photo in the drawer. It doesn't matter anymore. My contract with the Liu family ended long ago. Outside, the last drop of rain slipped from the eaves, vanishing silently into the night. Outside the window, the last drop of rain slipped from the eaves, vanishing silently into the night. A few days later, I was helping organize documents at the psychology department's volunteer recruitment desk. The line stretched long, voices buzzing endlessly. Since those rainy night photos had spread across the forum, Willow's name had become the campus's trending topic. Next, the senior asked mechanically, name, department, and why do you want to join the psychological aid volunteer group? I looked up, and there she was. Willow, business school. Because I want to understand the human heart. The room fell silent instantly. The senior jerked her head up, pupils widening behind her glasses. I heard the crowd whispering, sharp and cutting. Quiet. I spoke. carrying a stack of files as I walked forward. Several pens were still tucked into the pocket of my white coat. I had just come from the lab. Professor Wong. This student, the senior, was uneasy. I saw. My tone was steady. My eyes rested on her face for less than a second. The volunteer group has standards. Anyone who meets them can participate. Fill this out. I handed her a form, my fingers without the slightest tremor, as though she were just another ordinary applicant. But only I knew that in that instant. The tightening in my chest nearly strangled my breath. Saturday's training. 20 volunteers crowded into a small classroom. While I sat in the monitoring room, observing through the cameras, Lisa was explaining, her voice crisp, her demonstration professional. Empathy is not sympathy, but putting yourself in the other person's place to understand their feelings, she said. On screen, Willow sat in the back row, eyelids heavy, yet she still kept her back straight, diligently taking notes. I noticed the dark circles under her eyes and remembered the record of nonviolent communication being checked out. She must have stayed up all night finishing it. Next, pair up for practice. She was assigned to face a round-faced girl. During the exercise she seemed stiff, like reciting from memory. Stop, Lisa corrected her, when listening. Lean your body forward, like this. Then she lowered her voice. Professor Wong said if you feel uncomfortable, you can leave early. Willow's body visibly stiffened. She asked softly, he's here? Lisa pointed to the corner camera in the monitoring room. He's in charge of this activity. I saw her bite her lip, her back instantly tensing. Then, forcing herself, she gave the girl opposite her a faint smile, strained, but earnest. Let's continue. I'm very interested. I stared at the screen, my fingers unconsciously tightening. In truth, I should have stepped away long ago, returned her fully to the world she belonged to, but I couldn't. The afternoon was the field assessment, answering the campus psychological hotline. I was in the supervision room next door, listening to her voice through the headset. Hello, this is. The caller cut her off. I want to drop out. I can't take it anymore. Everyone's better than me. I study until 3 a.m. every day and it's still useless. Her voice faltered. Flustered. You've been working really hard. Working hard is worth shit. The boy's shout was piercing. A silence followed in the headset. I almost reached for the intercom, ready to tell her what to say, but in the next second, she spoke, softly, with a trembling undertone. Failing a class is scary, but it's not as bad as being disappointed in yourself, right? There was a pause of 3 seconds on the other end. How do you know that? Just a guess. She drew a breath. I'm often disappointed in myself too. My hand froze over the intercom. My chest struck as if by a blow. In that moment, she wasn't the sharp-edged heiress of the Liu family, but simply a girl learning to make peace with herself. And for the first time, I felt a dangerous illusion. Maybe she really was slowly drawing closer to me. The timer hit 8:15. Through the headset, I heard her voice steady. Unexpectedly, her words began to flow, the caller's emotions gradually easing. When she gently suggested, talk to your professor, a small laugh came from the other side. At the final second before the countdown reached 0, her voice still carried warmth. Thank you for being willing to tell me all this. Beep. The timer stopped at 0:03. The call ended. On the screen, she sat upright, but her back was soaked with cold sweat. The door opened, and Lisa led her in. I sat before the monitoring screen, shoulders relaxing under my white coat. On the desk lay the evaluation form, and in the last column my pen left a few words. Natural empathy. Excellent. You did well. When I spoke, there was a trace of warmth in my voice, even I hadn't noticed it myself. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a golden boundary between us. She stood at that line of light and shadow, hesitating as if she might step across at any moment. Thank you, she murmured. I learned a lot. I lifted my head, looking at her behind my glasses. My gaze gave nothing away. Why did you come to be a volunteer? Her hand clenched. She drew in a breath. Because I want to know how you see me, not just as a client or a research subject. The air froze. My fingers tightened slightly on the evaluation form, the pen tip bleeding ink until it spread into a black stain. I turned my eyes away, set the pen down. It's getting late. There's training again next week. She didn't move. When's your flight to Boston? She suddenly asked. My movement faltered, the file nearly slipping from my hands. I forced a calm reply. Next month, the 5th, 10 in the morning. I'll see you off. No need. I tried to keep the distance. I will. Her voice was firmer than I expected. It's my own decision. Nothing to do with the contract. At last I looked up at her. In that instant, I knew something complicated flickered in my eyes. Desire, unease, and emotions almost pressed to the depths. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Professor Wong. Something's wrong. Hotline Group B has a problem. Lisa rushed in. I immediately stood, the hem of my coat sweeping up with the movement. Behind me, on the desk, the black ink stain slowly dried, like a lonely, solidified star. Chapter 7. The Broken Crown. Willow's high heels struck a hurried rhythm against the marble floor. The Lu Corporation headquarters was unusually silent today. Not even the receptionist was in sight. As the elevator reached the top floor, her phone buzzed again, the 17th unread message from Maria. Pick up the phone. Something huge happened. The chairman's office door was ajar, and inside came her father's voice, heavy with a weariness she had never heard before. Save what we can. Pushing the door open, Willow saw her father slumped in the leather chair, suit jacket thrown carelessly on the floor, tie loosened around his neck. Papers were piled high on the desk, the topmost stamped in glaring red, court seizure order. Dad. Pablo lifted his head, eyes bloodshot. Willow, sit. Willow had never seen her father like this. Even at her mother's funeral, he had maintained the flawless image of a business elite. Carefully stepping around the scattered documents, she sat down on the visitor's chair, her fingertips brushing the cold surface of the desk. The corporation has run into some trouble. Pablo rubbed his temples. Ito Corporation reported us for financial fraud. The Securities Commission has already opened an investigation. But our finances aren't problematic, right? Willow's voice tightened. They weren't. Her father gave a bitter smile. But last week someone hacked into the financial system and tampered with it. Now all the evidence points at us. Outside, sunlight still shone brightly, glinting off the golden logo of Lu Corporation. Suddenly, George's words echoed in Willow's mind. Emotional dependency and personality formation under privileged environments. Now that privilege was crumbling, she felt a wave of dizziness. How serious is it? Extremely. Her father's voice sounded like it came from far away. Assets frozen. Stock price down 60%. Bank loans due next week. If we don't find a solution, Lu Corporation will be bankrupt within a month. Bankrupt. The word landed on Willow's chest like a hammer. The gilded cage she had lived in since childhood, the limited edition handbags within reach, the custom-made heels, the rare sports cars, everything built on the Lu Empire's splendor, about to vanish into smoke. What can I do? She heard herself ask. Pablo's gaze flickered. Makoto came to see me yesterday. Makoto Ito, heir of Ito Corporation, Harvard Business School graduate, a rising star in the world of finance, and the mastermind behind the report against the Lu family. What does he want? You. Her father looked straight into her eyes. He proposed marriage. If we agree, Ito Corporation will withdraw the report and inject capital to save Lu. The office air conditioning suddenly felt icy. Willow clenched her fists, her newly manicured crystal nails digging into her palms. That's blackmail, she said. That's business. Pablo sighed. Of course, the decision is yours. Her phone buzzed again. A push notification popped up. Makoto Ito, heir of Ito Corporation, the new prodigy of business. The photo showed Makoto in a sharp suit, standing in front of the NASDAQ billboard, his handsome face wearing a confident smile. Willow lifted her head toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of her father's office. From the 48th floor, she could overlook the entire city, ants of pedestrians and cars, the ordinary world she had never truly known. I'll do it, she said. It was already late at night when a knock came at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Pablo standing outside, his suit wrinkled, as if he had aged 10 years overnight. Mr. Lu. I opened the door, my brows furrowing. Pablo didn't bother with pleasantries. He handed me a tablet directly. I need your help. On the screen was a series of complicated financial charts and email records. I swiped quickly, my gaze sharpening as I read. The forgery is highly professional, but the pattern is obvious. I pointed at several transaction records. This type of hedging doesn't match Lu Corporation's usual investment strategy. You can read this. Pablo looked slightly surprised. I removed my glasses and wiped them. I majored in both finance and psychology at Wharton. Didn't you do a background check before hiring me as Willow's emotional companion? Pablo gave a bitter smile. Of course I did. I chose you precisely because of your business acumen. Willow will eventually have to take over the corporation. She needed someone who could both keep her happy and assist her in business. I finished calmly. Unfortunately, the contract ended early. Circumstances have changed. Pablo pulled up a photo, Willow and Makoto sitting across from each other at a restaurant. Makoto leaning in to pour her wine. Willow has agreed to Makoto's proposal. My finger left a fingerprint on the tablet. Under the light, my expression looked like a carefully crafted mask, only the corner of my eye twitching slightly. Congratulations, I said. But what does that have to do with me? Makoto is not a good match. Pablo's voice suddenly grew weary. This report was orchestrated by him. He doesn't just want Willow, he wants Lu's core technology. I set the tablet down on the coffee table, gently, but with a certain finality. With all due respect, Mr. Lu, this isn't my problem. My contract with the Lu family is over. 5 million, Pablo said. Help me uncover the traces of Ito Corporation's forged evidence, and I'll give you 5 million. I don't need money. And what about Willow? Pablo looked straight into my eyes. Can you really bear to watch her walk into the fire pit? I turned and walked toward the window. The city glittered under the night, the Lou Corporation building still shining brightly in the distance, yet already teetering. I thought of Willow crouched in the rain, thought of what she said in our first session. I always hurt the people who treat me well. I'll need all internal communication records and system login logs, I finally said, especially from the IT department. Pablo exhaled deeply and pulled a USB drive from his briefcase. Already prepared. I took the drive. Its metallic surface chilling to the touch. Why me? Surely Lou Corporation has more specialized teams. Because only you understand Willow. Pablo's voice softened suddenly. And only you, she might listen to. After sending Pablo away, I stood on the balcony and lit a cigarette. I rarely smoked, but tonight I needed the numbness. My phone lit up. The campus forum pushing a new notification automatically. Breaking. Lou Heiress and Ito Heirs engagement banquet to be held this week. Through the haze of smoke, I recalled Willow's expression the day the contract ended, when she threw coffee at me. So proud, so entitled. Now, could she still hold on to that pride? The Peninsula Hotel ballroom glittered with lights. Willow stood before the full-length mirror in the dressing room. The white gown traced her slender waistline, and the diamond necklace on her neck was worth a fortune, yet it felt heavy as shackles. Smile, bride. Maria leaned against the doorway, swirling a glass of champagne. The place is packed with reporters. Willow tried to curve her lips. The girl in the mirror gave back a hollow smile. Only 72 hours had passed since she agreed to the engagement. Yet it felt like a century. Makoto's efficiency was terrifying. Press conference, engagement banquet, even honeymoon arrangements, all prepared with precision. Your dad looks terrible. Maria handed her a glass of champagne. I've never seen him like this. Willow didn't respond. He didn't come home last night. Stayed at the office. I heard he found some financial genius to check the accounts. Maria suddenly went silent, as if she had said too much. Willow turned sharply. Who? I don't know. Just something I heard. Maria avoided her gaze. Come on. It's time. The doors of the ballroom opened slowly. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Makoto stood at the end, his black tailcoat accentuating his broad shoulders and trim waist, his handsome face wearing a charming smile. But Willow saw only the calculation in his eyes, the cold focus of a snake watching prey. The music began. She took her father's arm and walked toward Makoto. Flashbulbs on both sides of the red carpet burst one after another, like a silent crossfire. My beautiful bride. Makoto took her hand, brushing his lips against the back of it, his touch icy. Finally, this day has come. Willow forced a smile. His fingers tightened around her wrist, hard enough to bruise. It was a warning, a reminder of who held control. The engagement ceremony was brief but lavish. When Makoto slid the 5-carat diamond ring onto her finger, applause filled the hall. Willow's eyes swept the crowd, and suddenly caught a familiar figure in the corner. George, wearing a waiter's uniform, quietly replacing trays. What was he doing here? Following her gaze, Makoto chuckled. Oh, I hired a professional psychological consultant team to ensure the banquet ran smoothly. Do you know him? Not really. Willow quickly looked away. He worked for my family before. People like that are only fit to serve at tables. Makoto whispered against her ear, his breath chilling her skin. Remember your place, Miss Lou. Midway through the banquet, Willow excused herself under the pretense of retouching her makeup. In the shadowed corridor near the dressing room, a figure blocked her path. George, she lowered her voice. What are you doing here? I handed her a tray with a few delicate pastries. You haven't eaten anything tonight. That simple gesture made Willow's nose sting. For 3 years, George had always been like this, anticipating her needs before she realized them herself. Now, when everyone else cared only about her status, her family, her value, he alone remembered she might be hungry. Thank you. She picked up a pastry, though it tasted like nothing. My father asked you to come. I didn't answer directly. Makoto isn't the right choice. I have no choice. Willow gave a bitter smile. If Lou collapses, thousands of employees lose their jobs. My father will. Forget it. You wouldn't understand. I do understand. My voice was quiet. But you don't have to sacrifice yourself. Willow lifted her head, seeing George's eyes deep as a well under the dim corridor light, filled with emotions she couldn't decipher. In that moment, she longed to throw everything aside, to collapse into the arms of the men who had once indulged her every whim and cry her heart out. But reality held her spine straight. This is my decision. Just give me your blessing. From afar, Makoto's voice carried, Willow, darling, it's time to cut the cake. I stepped back, slipping on the mask of a waiter once more. Someone's calling you, fiancé. Willow wanted to say something, but in the end she only lifted her gown and turned away. A few steps later, she heard George's voice, barely audible, just hold on 3 more days. When she turned back, the corridor was empty. Only the tray of pastries proved it hadn't been a dream. Taking off the waiter's uniform, I changed back into my own shirt. In the Peninsula Hotel staff locker room, Luis was hammering furiously on his laptop keyboard. Got it. Luis suddenly whispered, Excited. The private email records of Ito Corporation's head of IT. Look at this attachment. I leaned over. On the screen was an encrypted file. Its title, Lu Corporation Operation Manual. A detailed guide for forging financial reports. I skimmed quickly, the corner of my lips curling in a cold smile. Makoto's too arrogant, sending something like this through a personal email. Will it hold up as evidence? Not enough. I shook my head. We need direct transaction records. Keep digging into all of that IT director's social accounts. Luis gave a low whistle. You look terrifying when you're serious. Is this really for the 5 million? I didn't answer. My phone buzzed with a message from Pablo. Makoto just pulled all of Lu's core technology files. Time is running out. Outside, the night had deepened. I looked toward the Peninsula Hotel, still ablaze with lights, laughter spilling out. Right now Willow should be cutting the cake. Makoto standing behind her, his hand on her waist, declaring ownership before the world. 3 days. I only needed 3 days to find the evidence that could turn everything around. But could Willow endure 3 days? Hey, Luis interrupted my thoughts. If you really save Lu Corporation, will you tell Willow? I closed the laptop. No. Why not? Because she deserves better. I picked up my coat. Someone who doesn't require her to sacrifice her own future. Luis shook his head, muttering, so self-righteous. Did you ever ask what she actually wants? I gave no reply. The corridor's surveillance camera rotated silently, recording the image of my departing back, lonely and resolute. Chapter 8, Lifetime Contract. The ground floor press hall of the Lu Corporation tower was packed. Willow Lu stood behind the curtain, watching her father speak confidently beneath the glare of flashbulbs. Just a month ago, this place had been shrouded in the shadow of bankruptcy. Now, it had become a stage for victory. The Securities Commission has officially withdrawn all charges against Lu Corporation. Pablo's voice was steady and powerful. Ito Corporation's illegal actions will be punished by the law. Willow's gaze drifted toward the corner. Standing by the wall was George, white shirt, black trousers, looking like an ordinary assistant. If not for the stock market data flashing rapidly across the tablet in his hands, no one would have guessed he was the mastermind behind this reversal. Mesmerized, Maria appeared beside her, handing her a glass of champagne. Willow accepted it, her fingertip tapping lightly against the rim. My dad invited him. Who? Oh, your ex-emotional companion. Maria smirked. No, I did. What's a celebration without the key contributor, right? Willow took a sip. The bubbles burst on her tongue, leaving a faint bitterness. Since that night in the car, when she kissed George's cheek, they hadn't met again. He had turned down all invitations to the celebration. If not for Maria's maneuvering, he probably wouldn't have shown up tonight either. When the press conference ended, the guests moved upstairs to the banquet hall. Willow deliberately slowed her steps, waiting for George to draw near. Long time no see. She tried to sound casual as she approached me. Harvard. Postponed. My eyes flicked over her deep blue gown. You look nice. Such a simple compliment, yet it made Willow's ears burn. Over the past 3 years, George had given her countless compliments, but they had always been professional behavior. Now, this plain, you look nice, struck her heart harder than any ornate praise. I have something to tell you. She gathered her courage. After the banquet, can we talk alone? I adjusted my glasses, my eyes unreadable behind the lenses. Of course, the celebration was louder than expected. Lu employees reveled in their survival, champagne bottles popping one after another. Willow navigated waves of congratulations, her eyes constantly searching for George. He stood by the buffet, speaking quietly with Luis, politely acknowledging guests when necessary, yet always seeming like an outsider. By midnight, most guests had left. Willow seized the chance and led me to the terrace. Stars dotted the sky, the city lights glittering beneath. First, thank you. She turned to face me. For everything you did for the Lu family. I leaned on the railing, letting the night breeze ruffle my hair. I told you, it was repayment. No, not just that. Willow stepped closer. Thank you for 3 years of patience. Thank you for helping even after the contract ended. Thank you for... Willow. I cut her off softly. What are you trying to say? Willow drew a deep breath. Images flashed in her mind, the way he shielded her from drinking, the way he stayed up late making notes for her, the sight of his back as he walked away in the rain. I like you. The words spilled out. Absurdly simple. Not as an employer liking an employee. Not as a subject liking an analyst. Just liking you. The terrace fell into a terrifying silence. She saw George's expression freeze, as though he had heard something impossible. You know the clause in our contract, I finally said. No reverse pursuit. Violators pay 1 million. Willow pulled a check from her purse. Here, 1 million, to buy the right to pursue you. I didn't take it. Straightening my posture, I suddenly laughed, a kind of laughter Willow had never seen before. Open and unrestrained. Are you sure? I asked. I'm no longer the George who was always at your beck and call. I'll be busy with my own career. I'll have a bad temper. I might not remember that you like 2 spoons of sugar in your coffee. I remember you like American coffee. No sugar. Willow cut me off. You like blue. Hate cilantro. And when you read, you unconsciously touch your earlobe. I raised a brow. You've been observing me. 3 years together every day. I ought to have learned something. Willow pushed the check into the pocket of my shirt. So, what's your answer? My hand covered hers, warm and steady. The answer is I can't take this check. Willow's heart sank, because that clause, I said slowly, expired when the contract ended. I leaned closer, my breath brushing against her lips. So you can pursue me for free. Willow was just about to respond when the terrace door burst open. Pablo stood there, his expression complicated as he looked at our clasped hands. Dad. Willow instinctively tried to pull her hand back, but I held it firmly. Mr. Liu. I nodded in greeting. Calm and respectful. Pablo sighed. I knew this would happen. From his inner pocket, he drew out an envelope and handed it to me. Here, I've had it ready for a while. I opened it. Inside was a check, 1 million. This is, Willow's eyes widened. Penalty payment. Pablo shook his head helplessly. The contract stated that if my daughter pursued you, I'd owe you 1 million. Remember? I chuckled. That clause was meant to restrain Willow, not you. Legally, I was the contracting party. Pablo patted my shoulder. Take it as a bonus. And by the way, he turned to his daughter. If your mother were still here, she would have liked this young man. After Pablo left, Willow and I looked at each other, and then both burst into laughter. So, Willow bit her lip. Does this mean we're now? Take it slow. I gently squeezed her hand. You just ended up relationship. You need time to figure out your true feelings. I'm very clear about my feelings. Then prove it to me. My eyes glimmered with challenge. Prove that it's not gratitude or habit, but that you're truly ready to love someone as an equal. Willow wanted to argue, but then realized George was right. For 23 years, she had never truly lived independently, never made decisions on her own. If they rushed into this now, their relationship would only repeat the old patterns. All right. She lifted her head, meeting my gaze. Give me time. I smiled, released her hand gently. I'll wait for you. The psychology department graduation ceremony was packed with people. Wearing a black suit, I received my doctoral degree certificate. At the back of the hall, Willow stood quietly, watching. In these 3 years, she had moved out of the Liu family mansion, renting a small apartment next door to mine. Her first time paying utilities herself, her first time nearly burning the kitchen while cooking, her first time sweating nervously in a job interview. Countless first times traced her path of growth, and I had always kept just the right distance. I taught her how to read the electric meter, but never paid the bill for her. I took her to the hospital when she had food poisoning, but refused to cook her meals. I helped revise her startup business plan, but never used my own connections to open doors for her. Next, please welcome the doctoral graduate representative, George, to give a speech. Amid applause, I walked toward the podium. Willow's hand touched the file in her purse, her heartbeat quickening. Today, she would finally fulfill the promise she made 3 years ago, to prove her growth and her sincerity. Lastly, I want to thank someone special. My voice carried through the hall via the speakers. She taught me that the truest emotions often hide beneath the most imperfect appearances. Willow's nose stung. In these 3 years, she had founded an NGO dedicated to providing psychological support for children of wealthy families, helping them step out of the bubble of privilege with her own experience. I was her first advisor, and her harshest critic. After the ceremony, I saw her under the cherry blossom tree in front of the psychology building. The June sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows over me, just as it had 3 years ago when we first met. Doctor, she smiled as she approached. Your speech was wonderful. I placed my graduation cap on her head and asked, did you like the last part? Narcissist. Willow took off the cap and handed it back. I have something for you. From her purse, she pulled out a craft envelope and handed it to me solemnly. Raising a brow, I opened it. Inside was a meticulously drafted contract, lifetime partner agreement. The terms are simple. Willow's voice trembled slightly. Party A, Willow. Party B, George. Agreement to live together, support each other, for a duration of a lifetime. I finished her sentence, my eyes shining. No penalty clauses. None. Willow shook her head. This time, it's not a business contract. I carefully read each clause, the curve of my lips growing wider. Finally, I drew out a pen and signed my name with bold strokes at Party B's signature line. That simple. Willow blinked. No bargaining. I stuffed the contract back into the envelope, pulled her into my arms. Do you know how long I've waited for this moment? 6 years, since the first time I saw you. The first time, not in the cafe. No, here. I pointed to the cherry blossom tree behind me. Your freshman spring, you fell asleep under this tree. I passed by, saw the sunlight on your face, you looked like a painting. Willow remembered that photo he had once set as his screensaver. So you already love at first sight? I chuckled. You could call it that. Later, when Mr. Liu came to me, I couldn't believe my luck. Willow's eyes grew hot with tears. 6 years had passed, from false service to true affection, from inequality to equality, and at last they had reached this point. So, she wrapped her arms around my neck. Can you kiss me now, doctor? My answer was a deep kiss, gentle yet resolute. Just like me. Cherry blossoms drifted down, and in the distance, cheers of graduates rang out. Willow closed her eyes, thinking this must be what happiness felt like, not as a princess held in someone's palm, but as an equal, standing side by side with the one she loved, not far away. Pablo and Luis turned away in tacit understanding. Did we win the bet? Luis asked with a grin. Pablo pulled out a check. 1 million. I told you they'd end up together within 6 years. If I'd known, I would have joined the wager too. Luis shook his head, chuckling. But seriously, when you first chose George, was it really because he suited Willow? Not entirely. Pablo looked toward the two figures embracing in the distance. Also because the way he looked at Willow was exactly the way I once looked at her mother. Sunlight spilled across every corner of the campus. Beneath the cherry blossom tree, the lifetime partner agreement lay quietly on the grass, bearing witness to two hearts finally finding their true rhythm together.